Okay. I'll call the committee of the whole meeting to order. Tuesday, the 25th of July, 2006, right at 6:30 p.m. Councilman Porter is present, Councilwoman Garner is present, Vice Mayor Losner, Councilman Hodge, and Councilwoman Bell. 2A is the approval of the committee of the whole meeting minutes of the July 11, 2006. The motion for approval.
I'll move them.
Moved by Councilwoman Bell, second by Councilman Hodge. Any questions on the minutes? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 2B is the conveyance of city-owned scattered lots to CRAs. The motion for approval. Moved by Councilman Porter, second by Councilwoman Bell. Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment to the RFQ 2601, Losner Park. The motion for approval. Moved by Councilman Porter, second by Councilman Hodge. Question? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 2D is the Florida Housing Coalition Agreement, tab 4.
Move it.
Motion.
Moved by Councilman Hart, second by Councilwoman Bell. Any question on the coalition agreement?
Just one comment. You might want to include 4A with this one. There's going to be a presentation. That is Jamie Ross from the Florida Housing Coalition, and they are connected. And so you may also want to hear, I know you do the presentation to explain what the land trust is.
You want to come forward?
Absolutely. Good evening. Thanks for having me here. I'm Jamie Ross.
Jamie, would you like for us to let the screen down and use the laptop? And if you would like, sit here where Rick is so you can use the microphone?
Down here? Okay. You can sit right here. No. It's no problem. It's no problem. So how does this work? You all come on this side? Okay.
We're working on that.
Well, while you're getting settled, can everybody hear me through this? Is this okay?
Can you hear through that?
Okay, then I'll come over here. Okay. All right, that's fine. That's great. Thank you. Okay. My day job actually is I'm the Affordable Housing Director at 1,000 Friends of Florida, which is a statewide nonprofit growth management organization, and then I'm the president of the Florida Housing Coalition, which is another statewide nonprofit that does training and technical assistance. And I head up what's called the Florida Community Land Trust Institute. We started that actually in January of 2005 because there was a growing interest in Florida in community land trusts. And it's quite amazing. Like right now there's over 20 different communities that are starting in some stage of starting a community land trust, which is far more than any other state in the nation. In fact, there was recently a national conference on community land trusts in Colorado, and a fellow joked at lunch and said that during the time that we're having lunch, I think there's 2 more CLTs that have started in Florida. So there's a great deal of interest, and the reason is because we've been having these skyrocketing costs and so on, and Rick really ably started the discussion, which is that you have a separation of the land from the building and use a 99-year ground lease to create long-term, actually perpetual affordability. And that's the big difference between this tool and the many other tools that you're going to be using for affordable housing, because a community land trust is just one tool. And there's really a lot of tools that every local government needs to use to address affordable housing. This is just one of them. The books that you all have are basically have nothing to do with community land trust specifically. They have to do with affordable housing in general, and discuss what it is, how it's built, and kind of like soup to nuts affordable housing. There's appendices in the back that talk about all the financing programs and so forth. So it was specifically written for elected officials and their key staff, so I just wanted you all to have that. That's a book that I wrote for the state, and those are all free to local governments and their staff. So community land trust. First of all, we'll start affordable housing, as you know, is either home ownership or it's rental. And those pictures that you have there are all affordable housing in Florida, and those are the pictures that come from the book that you have in front of you. These are all pictures of affordable housing in Florida. So what is affordable housing? It's not cheaper in any way, less well-built. It's affordable. It's different from market rate housing because of the financing, either at the construction financing, which generally in rental housing, that's how we do it in Florida. We stay away from things like tenant subsidies, vouchers, that kind of thing, not generally favored in Florida. The financing is to the development. But in homeownership, the financing is generally, also partly to the development, but to the homeowner, to the down payment and the closing cost assistance. And generally around the state, everywhere other than Miami-Dade, what folks use for that is the Sadowski Act monies. You've got both. You've got the Sadowski Act monies and you've got those surtax monies that, unfortunately have been in the news lately. But anyway, the problem is that historically, the subsidy is, actually, originally, when things got started, were grants, and then they were recaptured. You can do that slide more, on resale. But what happens is when local governments recapture, let's say they make a deferred payment loan for the value of the subsidy that's given them, down payment and closing costs, and then the family sells a house, and they get back that money. Like, in fact, Rick was just referring to it, an instance like that, where you'll get back that money for that lot. But then you as the local government are saying, okay, that's really nice, I've got this money back, now what do I do with it? Because I can't get another family at that income level into another house, even though I've got the repayment of that money, because the incomes are going along, maybe like people are getting 3% raises, but the housing prices are skyrocketing. So that gap is ever wider, as you can see from that slide. You got the house prices increasing 80%, your median family income increasing 1.4% from 2002 to 2005. So that's a graph that tells the story that you really already know anecdotally. Okay, next slide. And actually, Florida recently has been suffering more than the rest of the nation. You see from this slide that we had the appreciation in Florida at over 24%, when nationwide it was over 13%. So it's been pretty acute here. Basically, what we have is that we're catching up to California. We really have, the anomaly, I don't think, is how much our prices have increased recently. I think it's really how low they were for such a long time. Being as we are an incredibly beautiful state surrounded by water on three sides, it's really been kind of amazing how low our prices have been for so long. And so even though we're probably not going to see the same kind of skyrocketing prices in the next 3 years that we've seen over the past 3 years, nobody expects them to fall below. They just expect that appreciation to go up at a hopefully more reasonable rate. So what we have is when the first-time home buyer sells what was an affordable home, that home is no longer affordable due to that appreciation, and we can't get another family in for that same subsidy. So that leaves us with that situation where we have folks who really expected to be homeowners because of the education they got and because of the jobs that they were in. They do not expect or anticipate or not gratified being renters, but they are finding homeownership out of their reach. Okay. So that's where community land trusts come in. It's a tool for providing homeownership to those who would otherwise be renters, or else they need to leave the community to become homeowners. So when we're talking about community land trusts, the comparison between the home ownership of community land trusts is a comparison to rental, not a comparison to home ownership. Because if a person could afford to buy a home in your community that's not in the community land trust, they should. I mean, that would be to their benefit economically, as we'll get to another slide. So the mechanics of it, and I know I'm going very fast, but it's good for your timing here tonight, and then I'll be happy to answer questions. You have a nonprofit, a 501c3, that is the CLT. Okay, so, and by the way, this kind of land trust, it's not really a trust at all. Like, I'm sure you may know about Florida. I know your city attorney does Florida land trust. That's nothing to do with it. It's not a trust. That is the name that's given to it, and in fact, there's no statutory, there's no Florida chapter on community land trust. It's not a trust. There's not a beneficiary. There's not a trustee. So what you have is a 501c3 that is going to be owning the property, the dirt, and selling the home, subject to a 99-year ground lease. So when you're the home buyer, you're getting a deed to the improvements, and you're getting a 99-year ground lease to the land. Okay? And the two key provisions in that ground lease, what makes a community land trust a valuable tool, are these provisions that your resale is limited to income-eligible households. In other words, when you go to sell that property, you cannot sell it on the open market. You can only sell it to whatever the community land trust has defined as an income-eligible household. So we'll talk about that more too. And then the resale price is limited to keep the house affordable to the next buyer, which is called a fair but not a market rate return. So there's a restriction. I'm going to stay on this slide for a bit because this is sort of the crux of it. So there's a restriction on what the house can be sold for. And the question that always comes up is, well, what is a fair return? And that's where you have to compare the home ownership of the community land trust house to rental. Because if you start comparing it to home ownership, you're going to sort of be offended by any kind of limit on that appreciation. So there's a balance between what you're trying to accomplish, which is getting a person into home ownership and creating a permanent stock of affordable housing for the community, which a lot of folks talk about as a permanent stock of workforce housing. And okay, so the next slide. So the benefits for the home buyer. The price of the home is now affordable. Why is it affordable? Because they haven't paid for the land. They got the deed to the improvements. They didn't get a deed to the land. They got a lease for the land. They didn't pay for the land. So in many communities, like a recently formed community land trust in Woodruff Park, which is a small city outside of Orlando, their houses are worth less than the land that they sit on. So the house is actually sold for $126,000. The land is worth over $150,000. So the buyers of the community land trust houses didn't pay for the land. They only paid for the improvements. Okay? Now they have a lease on the land, which they actually make lease payments on, but they're fairly nominal. You'll see lease payments usually like $25, $35 a month. It's not a large payment. So the price of the home is now affordable because you've taken the land out of the equation. Staying in the community without being a renter means that they're not making rent payments, they're making mortgage payments. If they itemize at tax time, then their interest is deductible, okay, if they do that. But more than that, I think the most important is the financial stability. We have had a huge problem with renters losing their to condo conversions, and also just never knowing when the rent's going to get raised. And it's very hard for families to save and to budget when they don't know how much their monthly payment's going to be. When you get into a community land trust house, you get a 30-year fixed mortgage, and you're going to have the ability to save. Now the key benefits for the public, and this is really the driver in Florida for so many communities interested in community land trusts. It's the public investment that's being retained. Especially with so much money being generated by the documentary stamp revenue, and then to see so much of it, it's like, yeah, it's really successful because we've created all this affordable housing, but then it gets lost. And there's a feeling, especially among people who are, fiscally conservative, or really just plain want to be responsible with public dollars, that, hey, we made that family really rich, and we no longer have that public subsidy, and it's great that family now has earned all this wealth and homeownership, and that's cool, but what have we got to show for it as far as our workforce housing? And a lot of communities now are facing problems even recruiting and retaining teachers and people to work in their city offices, and so they feel like they want to retain a stock of affordable housing, and that's what the Community Land Trust does for the local government. It's like, you know that when you donate land for a community land trust, and that's for your workforce housing, your affordable housing, that it'll always be there. And in order for the community land trust to be successful, you do have to have the partnership and support of the local government. I've mentioned, and I think it's already, you have already got this on your plate and realizing it, that it takes a donation of land. Because in order for the community land trust or the 501c3 to not sell the land, not mortgage the land, to have it just stay out of the equation, they have to just be given the land, because they're never going to be able to pay back the land. So it does create the need for that donation of land. Right now, the Florida legislature is extremely interested in community land trust, and that's part of the reason Rick referred to House Bill 1363 that just passed this session, which does have that surplus lands language in it. That came from Senator Bennett's interest. He's got like 3 or 4 community land trusts in the district he covers, and their interest in getting land donated to community land trusts for permanent affordable housing. You're going to have a highly functioning nonprofit with the ability to provide a pipeline of qualified home buyers. In other words, you want for this to be successful to know that you've got a market for it. That means you've got pre-qualified folks. And this is getting a little bit into the nitty-gritty, but if I own a house and it's resale restricted, and I'm not going to get any more money on it no matter who I sell it to, I have no interest in having to find a buyer by myself, because it makes no difference who buys my house. I'm going to get the same price either way. So one of the benefits I think I might need as a homeowner of a CLT is that when I'm ready to sell, I want you to bring that buyer to me. That I think that needs to be part of the package, because if you really don't have the need, in other words, this is not a problem, because in every community where there's community land trusts, where it's the right time for a community land trust, economically, they've got more than enough qualified pipeline, people who are saying, yes, I would like that house. And that takes home buyer counseling as well. In fact, one of the things that we feel very strongly about is this is going to take a lot more counseling than you do for your general first-time home buyer. This is a new animal. This is, yes, you're becoming a homeowner. You have responsibilities of home ownership. If you need a new roof, you can't be calling the landlord. And yet you're going to have a restriction on the appreciation you're going to earn when you sell it. So folks need to really understand that. They can't have, a 2-hour course and sign a paper and say, oh yeah, we get it. There needs to be some serious understanding on the part of the home buyers, and this is what they want. And for some people, it won't be what they want, and they'll say thank you and no thank you. That's not for me. And they might be better off getting let's say a lesser home that they could fix up and not be part of a community land trust, if that's a possibility in your community. You need the lenders to be understanding the process, and that's part of the work that we do, is working with the lenders. There is a program in place with the Fannie Mae Corporation where they use a lease rider, which enables the community land trust loans to be sold on the secondary market, so that there's no issue for an institutional lender making a community land trust loan. Generally, what we've seen in Florida is that that's not the way these loans have been made. They've been handled by community bankers and portfolioed. The reason is because the rider, what it does is it says if there's a foreclosure, all the resale restrictions go away, which means then the property would be lost, or could potentially be lost. And like, for instance, the city of Winter Park was not comfortable with that. They felt like they're putting a lot of their public investment in there. They didn't want to take any chance of being lost in a foreclosure, and so they went with a community lender that would portfolio that loan. There would be notice if there was any like the folks were behind in their payments. The community land trust acts as a steward They have that's part of their role as a 501c3, and their mission is that they are steward of this land and this program, and they're going to step in and they're going to find out if that family is going to be able to make their payments, or if not, they're going to step in and they're going to take over the property, and so there's not a foreclosure and the property's not lost. Okay. So the challenges, the design of the resale formula. The resale formula can be designed in a number of ways. There's lots of variations. Generally, the two that are most commonly used is an appreciation-based formula and an index formula. An appreciation-based formula is you put the homeowner into the house, you get an appraisal of the property, and you have a formula in your lease that says upon resale, the homeowner gets 25% of the appreciation. I'm just pulling out a number. Okay, it gets 25% of the appreciation. And so when the home buyer gets ready to sell, there's another appraisal that's done, and then they get back 25% of the appreciation. So that's real quick and dirty, an appreciation formula. An index formula is where you would tie it to some index. Let's say the change in the area median income. It could also be tied to consumer price index. And generally, if you use an index formula, you're also going to have to put in plus any improvements that the homeowner made, because you can't just give them back something tied to an index, or they won't, they'll have no motivation to make any needed repairs or improvements because they won't get paid back that money. With an appreciation-based formula, they will, because the house will appreciate based on the fact that there's a new roof on it, or there's not. So this is very quick and dirty. This is the work that our organization will be doing with the staff, and then starting a community land trust. This is not done overnight. This is done with the board of the community land trust after you develop the board of the community land trust, and working with the community and determining what is right for the community. This is a very important piece of the success of the community land trust, is what formula you put in place. And you have to sit down and look at what you're trying to achieve. For instance, if I may, just give you a little for instance. Let's say what you wanted to achieve is that you want the person that goes into that house to stay in that house a long time. Well, you're going to use a different formula for that than you're going to use if you want to just get people in and out and have that stock available. So there's a lot of different considerations that are going to your formulas. And then the mechanics of resale, how that's handled. It could be that the seller could go and sell the property to whoever they want. They can use a realtor, they can find whatever buyer. They have to be income eligible, and there has to be the resale restriction, but they can do it directly. That's one way. Another way is they get ready to sell, they contact the CLT. The CLT immediately signs a purchase and sale contract, which is assignable, so that they really have sold the property back to the CLT. The CLT then gets the next buyer in the queue ready, and then when they go to closing, they just assign it over, and so then it's sold to that buyer. So those are examples of the mechanics of resale. And I already really discussed on foreclosure, where sometimes you can have where the restrictions survive, and sometimes where they do not survive. So this is just talking about some of the challenges. And then I mentioned here that the most significant challenge, and then it gets to the last slide, is the ad valorem tax issue. This is you can go to the next slide. This is an issue that is really unresolved in Florida. And the ad valorem tax issue is this. The property appraisers, as you know, they're elected officials, and they look to the Constitution to guide them on appraising the property. Some may appraise the community land trust property at its resale restricted value, and some may choose not to. And we don't have any state statute or constitutional amendment that addresses this issue. And this is something the Florida legislature is very interested in right now. And in fact, I also head up the Affordable Housing Committee of the Florida Bar, the Real Property and Probate section, and we're researching this issue right now because this is such, for everybody. We have all these community land trusts that are starting around the state, and they're being handled differently in different counties. And they're also changing. I just heard from Monroe County, which has it's 2 community land trusts and one getting started now. And they've got the oldest community land trust in the state, the Bahama Con Community Land Trust that was started in the late 90s. They have been apparently appraising it at its full value, but I understand now they are changing that and going to appraise it at its restricted resale value, which would basically be that you appraise it at what it sold for. So I gave you the example of Winter Park. The house sold for $126,000, then we would want the property appraiser to appraise it for $126,000. And when it sells again, and based on the resale formula, let's say it sells for $170,000 or $150,000, we would want it then to be appraised at that value. And so that's the challenge there. So at this point in time, what we advise the community land trust is to be conservative, to err on the side of your property appraiser hitting you with the big bill, which is very unfortunate because it undermines the local government's attempt to create this affordable housing stock, because it means that you could have gotten the Smith family into the house with one property tax bill, but you know what, then they can't afford it. We're going to have to put the Jones family in there because they can afford that higher property tax bill. So it is an unfortunate circumstance, but until it's settled, that's what we advise, is to err on the side of being conservative. Some CLTs help their home buyers with the taxes, not necessarily a very sustainable model. So I know you don't have a lot of time for more of a presentation than that. You can go to the next slide. So it's, again, I was just explaining the Florida Community Land Trust, the Institute, and we would be working directly with your staff and the nonprofit. No, let me just back up and say you don't have to create a new nonprofit to be a community land trust. You can use the existing nonprofit to act as a community land trust, so that would be something we would have to talk about, is what was best in your community. In other words, you could start you could be a spin-off, it could be a subsidiary of an existing nonprofit, or it doesn't even have to be that. But generally, the board of a CLT is what's called a tripartite board, which it has 3 sections to it. One is the leaseholders, the folks who are the lessees of the property. You leave seats for them, because obviously when you start you don't have any, but you leave seats for them to be a third of the board. A third of the board, the next third of the board is people just from the community, the low-income community, and the other third would be folks like bankers and lawyers and your typical, very similar to a CHODO, the way a CHODO is set up. And in fact, the CHODO form is a good form for a CLT, because then they can also access the CHODO home dollars, and actually was sort of set up that way in some federal legislation where community land trusts are defined, and use that tripartite board. But again, there's no law around this. You can do it the way it works best for your community. So any questions for that? Thank you, Mayor.
Say that I'm very encouraged by the potential. Maybe we could get some indication as to whether or not we could go off into some of those areas and determine whether or not some of be used as the initial to create. I see here where this vehicle seems to have the potential of working far better than some of the things we talked about earlier, where you only have that guaranteed first time. But if it's open-ended, they can sell, like they have a Pioneer Village, which was a good idea.
That's an excellent question. As any 501c3, it needs to do fundraising for its operational, ongoing. Most community land trusts are membership organizations, so they raise money through memberships, getting folks who support the whole community land trust idea in the community to be members. And they are 501c3s, so any contributions are tax deductible, so they can do fundraising and get grants as any other 501c3 can. But generally, you're going to see, and I have seen throughout the country, that where community land trusts are most successful, the local government is giving them operation subsidy, because they're not going to be able to, the lease fee that they collect is not going to be able to keep them in business. In fact, the lease fee is more like the canary in the coal mine to see how folks are, to make sure that the idea is that if they don't pay the lease, they're not paying the lease fee, they may be falling behind in their mortgage. So you will see operating subsidy, but it's not from local government in many places, although it's not imperative. The Middle Keys Community Land Trust that Rick Casey is running, he has an apartment complex that he uses the cash flow off of to help with his operational expenses. So, you can be creative, and then some community land trusts are developers of the houses. They can be developers of the houses, and they can get a developer fee for doing that. Some are not, and I want to be clear on that. So, like the oldest community land trusts in the nation, it's in Burlington, Vermont, been around for like 30 years, really doesn't involve new construction at all, or it hasn't for most of its existence. It's folks would just go find existing housing out in the community, then they come to the community land trust, they've given them money for the down payment and closing cost assistance in exchange for, now the community land trust gets the land and you get the improvement. In other words, that's the only way they could buy the house was to get that subsidy, and instead of just giving them the subsidy like we've been doing in Florida, they put the land in the community land trust and created a permanent stock. So in that case, in the Burlington case, they really aren't going to have any operating money because they're not developing property. So you do have to expect some subsidy from the local government in a case like that. So it's going to vary depending on the situation, but generally we are seeing local governments making some substantial commitments. In Sarasota, where Community Land Trust just got started, they've made a 3-year commitment for, I think, $250,000 a year for each year. They're planning a fairly large undertaking of development in Sarasota.
If I may also add to that, one of the things that we're looking at is where we're providing land to a developer as part of a development, like we're talking about on Southwest 4th Street and Southwest 6th Avenue. One of the things that will happen immediately prior to the conveyance of the lots to them is they will be appraised. And we will be given that much value in one of the condominium units that is created, one or more. And what I intend to do is, whatever value that is, buy up to make the next whole unit. So we may end up owning 1 or 2 units in that condominium complex that would then be transferred to the land trust. They could become a landlord if the land trust so chose, and the rent becomes an ongoing source of funding, or they may choose to sell the condominiums and escrow that money to use for operating expenses. And every place we provide land to a developer, this is going to be part of the deal, that we get ownership of units equal in value to what we put in land. And they don't have to provide that value till the project's finished, CO'd, and done. So they're getting the use of the land up front, which is a financial benefit to them because they didn't have to pay for it. And in the end is when they're literally paying for that land when the project is finished and all the costs are done. The land trust then owns units that it can either dispose of, typically condominiums, or continue to own and rent out and have a revenue stream from that.
And then if it's sold, then it would reinvest.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Also, you can do things like set up community contribution tax credit programs where businesses can donate real estate to the land trust, and take a tax credit equal to 50% of its value against their state corporate income tax carried forward. I think it's up to 5 years. So that there's other programs that can be accessed to set up motivators for businesses to donate properties, or bank to donate property that it may have to foreclose on in a low-income neighborhood that it doesn't want to carry in its inventory and is better off getting rid of today, and just as soon take a tax credit as selling it at some reduced value. I mean, there's ways.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I have a question. When these people go in, the lease starts from there.
Best way is to start it over.
Mayor, may I ask one question?
Go ahead, Mr. Porter.
Rick, let me ask a question. Even even our market rate residential areas where there aren't subsidies attached, we generally are seeing problems where a few bad people in the residential communities will make it harder for the ones that are trying to aspire to the level of that community. And I agree totally with the project. I'm saying, is there any sort of a mechanism involved other than just a standard code enforcement process where people would come in and take advantage of the opportunity and then therefore possibly try to run down or eventually ultimately run the community down? You understand my question?
Correct.
Because I'm in total agreement with the concept here. I just know that we're experiencing problems even in our regular residential communities where a few bad apples are coming in and making it hard for the communities to stay at the level that we all want them to be.
Two things. The experience, anecdotally, of community land trusts across the country is that the folks who are in the homes take wonderful care of the homes because they're really rather grateful to have this opportunity. But let's put that aside. The 99-year lease is fairly long and includes provision that you have to upkeep the property, or it's a default in the lease, which means the community land trust can then step back in. So that's again getting back to the community land trust as steward.
Well, that's good, because I certainly know that we all realize we have an affordable component of this community, which is probably a lot of us in this room right now that would like to be able to see some program like this come up fruition. But at the same time, there's always a few that tend to try to run things down and take advantage of what is a good opportunity. And we've seen that, and as long as there's a mechanism in place to deal with that, that's fine. I think that was really my main question, though. But I am in agreement. I think we need to do something. There's nothing else, to my knowledge, out there that even closely compares to this type of a project or a process by which you can create a stock that stays in place.
And this is so different from much of what's come before. Much of what's come before has been aimed at the family. How can we help Mr. and Mrs. Johnson get into their first home, or how can we help them get a home of their own? What subsidies can we provide them to help them get a home? And they had certain income level restrictions to be able to help Mr. and Ms. Johnson. The focus of this is how do we create and retain an affordable housing stock in our community. It's not to help Mr. and Mrs. Johnson.
And the comment that I was making is that we don't create a community of substandard everything without some sort of mechanisms to be able to set some controls in place that say, hey, you're given an opportunity here now, you have to perform up to a certain standard, otherwise, you're going to run, the whole community in the dirt, and we don't want to. I don't think any of us want to create that. Not that we perceive this as being that. Just want to make sure there's a mechanism in place. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Any other questions? Is there a motion for approval?
Motion.
Moved by Mr. Hodge, second by Ms. Garner. No further discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Good. Councilwoman Bell, budget.
Thank you, Mayor. We have filtration system upgrade for the wastewater treatment plant. Mr. Ivey?
Yes, Ms. Bell, Mayor and Council. Staff's recommendation that we enter into this contract with U.S. Filter Zimpro, Inc. For the purpose of upgrading and really overhauling an existing Zimpro filtration system at the wastewater treatment plant. This is an older system that needs to be overhauled. It's a sole source contract because this is Zimpro's product.
Pretty simple. Second. Pretty simple, sole source.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Any comments from council? Any comments from the audience? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the ayes carry. Thank you. Item number 6, budget amendment, encumbrance rollover from prior year.
Councilwoman Bell, Mayor and Council. Each year in the past, we've usually had a 6-month true-up in our budget. This year we didn't do that. We were working toward budgeting for every 6 months. I think people got used to it. So you budget at the beginning of the year, and if they know in the 6 months if they were off the target, if they could come in, and it just causes real adjustments. So this is an amendment related to encumbrances, and this happens every year. The rollover, things that did not get completed, may be in progress, of some sort. It did not get fully funded, so there's money left over. So this is a encumbrance rollover. We have to do a budget amendment to reflect that. So the amount is $5,522,990, and that will. And when you look in your recommendation, it moves the budget from 147 to 152 million, but it's really 154. That's an incorrect.
Okay.
So I want to make that note for the record in your green sheet. So it is the 154,036,506, which would be our new, for the record, budget for 0506.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from council? Is there a
Move the
motion?
recommendation.
It's been properly moved by the mayor.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Hodge. Yes.
One more point. This is done by ordinance, so
Right.
just so
It's housekeeping,
I didn't say
basically.
that, yeah.
Right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the ayes carry. Thank you, Mayor.
Item 4, public safety, Councilman Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to, if we could, just use tab 7 and 8 together. They're basically two mutual aid agreements, one with Florida Department of Corrections, and let's see, one is they're both mutual aid agreements that we currently need to extend. Go ahead, Mr. Manager. But
down south in Florida City, we have DCI, the state.
Move the recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by the mayor, seconded by Councilman Hodge. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor. That's item 7 and 8.
Roman numeral 5, utility, Councilman Hodge.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Check cashing USA and resolution.
Mr. Hodge, Mayor and Council, it's the staff's recommendation that Mayor and Council approve a proposed services agreement between Check Cashing USA and the City of Homestead. This would be an off-site alternative for payment of our utility bills. As you know, right now we man a window there that gets quite crowded. We even expanded the hours to Saturday so that we could get all the nature of the payments that come through the window to get everyone in there. This is an agreement with Check Cashing USA, which is a 24/7 operation. The location, they have 17 locations around the county. The location in Homestead's at North Chrome Avenue and 4th Street, the old convenience store that was converted. And they will be able to take, or will take our payments. There's a $1 surcharge to the city for taking our payments. But at a 24/7 operation, we want to start weaning people off of depending, the long line at customer service and the window as it's set up, and we hope that we'll also streamline that operation.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved and second. Any questions?
Chairman Hodge.
Yes, sir.
Question, I keyed in on that $1 service charge to the city. Yeah, I'm assuming I didn't see where they're permitted to charge any additional fee to the bill payer.
No, there's no additional.
This is coming out of us.
That's it. They're collecting for us.
In the past, I know we've had all the local banks collecting for us. Have they ever charged us?
I don't recall. I don't have that information.
I know there was a little bit of a difference because they were putting that money into our bank accounts and their institutions and presumably making
That's
money
not the
on
way
that.
the agreement is written. What the way the agreement is written is City of Homestead and licensee, that's the check cashing store, agree that licensee, that's the check cashing store, may charge CH customers no more than $1.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Which is in conflict
So it's
with
paid by the customer.
Paid by the
way this
customer.
agreement's written, it's paid by the customer, not by the city.
Okay.
The summary,
The summary does not read that way.
I didn't read the summary.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's because you wrote the contract. No, that was a concern.
Okay. How would the word get out to the public? Will be some,
Well, again, we're going to be doing inserts.
okay.
We'll be doing inserts to the electric utility bills. They will be, when they come through the drive-through, there'll be posted flyers there for people. We'll also have the stories promoted in our Hometown Tribune and for people that may make use of that. There's availability, we're not going for this right now, of a debit card they could use for this purpose as well. But we'll see how this works, and should be good.
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir. I just like to say, if you've ever driven by there certain times of the month, early or late, they will be down to the VFW trying to get in to pay that bill before 5 o'clock, and any way that we can spread some of that around, and most of those people that are there are paying with cash, so it would be just as easy to have that load on a system that's prepared to work it. So I think it would be a percentage, and certainly in our benefit for the customer service.
Apparently there's a question, Mr. Mayor, regarding the fee, but we have a couple of weeks before the council meeting, and we'll clarify and make sure that reads just the way that staff wants it to read.
Yeah. I hope it works. I hope we're not faced with it overwhelmed and want out of this deal.
I do agree.
To make a dollar a customer, they might be
Exactly. And hopefully that dollar is on the other end.
I'm curious, why did the local banks get out of the
Well, I'm not
the
quite
program?
sure. And I think basically what happened, because we're actually providing a service that's a pretty good service at our cost. You go to FPL, you're not going to do that at FPL. They have your check cashing there. You pay at those places. We do a lockbox at the bank. We haven't done that for some time, and I don't know why we got out of it necessarily. We'll have to research that and find out. But we could still have payment sites at the bank. We have payment on, and this is like through the internet, the way they're set up. If you make it from home through the internet, your payments that way as well. So there are a variety of ways. What we'd like to do is work our way out of that window. I mean, when we move to the new city hall, that's going to be an expensive and awkward addition to the new city hall if we're going to continue that. So
No, I just mentioned because if there's a dollar surcharge, and the banks can recoup $1, what have you, maybe to get back into providing that service, and we could at some point eliminate.
We'll clarify that.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, because of the way we're doing this business via the internet, this is a very, very generic way to collect this money. This is a non-exclusive contract. This would be very easy for any other organization, including a bank, to come in and do it. It doesn't require any special terminals, any special software. All it requires is the internet access. And what we're hoping other organizations will see this, other businesses will see this, and maybe also get involved in doing this and help us on this collection issue.
Maybe you want to talk to somebody, they may be interested. Yeah, never know.
It's been properly moved and second, and do enjoy the dialogue that we received on this. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Hard. Any business for the COW, Ms. Bell?
I have one item which I don't like to surprise you, but I was made aware of. I received a copy of a lawsuit this afternoon that was served on Councilwoman Bell. And the council's going to need to make a decision. Well, first of all, I need to know, there's an issue as to the defense of Councilwoman Bell. I need to know from the council as to whether you want to, just one more step. I had intended to discuss this at the next council meeting, put it on the agenda normally. The problem is, in sitting here counting the days that she has to respond, which is 20, you can get extensions, but I can't count on it in this kind of environment. And by doing it on the first council meeting in August, it puts her up against the 3 or 4 day deadline, and I don't think that that's fair and gives them a chance to file an appropriate defense. So the question is whether, first of all, I apologize for you hitting with this cold, but I got the lawsuit this afternoon and I started counting days, and so do you want to discuss this at a separate meeting? Do you want to discuss this now? However you want to do it, but I don't think that it's would be the best policy to wait until a couple of days before her filing deadline to decide how we're going to deal with this.
Shouldn't we tell them the specifics of who's suing?
Yeah, you're saying a lawsuit.
Okay.
I'm at a loss.
I'm sorry.
Surprise to me, too.
A lawsuit was served on her by the Redlands Company and sued her personally, alleging a violation of civil rights and a violation of the city charter as a result of actions that she took with respect to the whole Redlands issue. So the lawsuit asks for $9 million in damages.
9.7.
$9.7 million in damages.
We just take it out of the salaries.
Anyway, again, I apologize for sort of hitting you with this, but I'm on a litigation deadline. And so if you want to have a special call to discuss this, next week sometime, that's perfectly fine. You want to discuss it now, that's fine. If you want me to give you some parameters, and then you can discuss it, but it's up to, I do think we need to make a decision.
But didn't we recently pass an ordinance?
The problem is that this ordinance, that ordinance, which I tried to protect you from everything, ethically, this doesn't cover this type of lawsuit. There's not an ethical violation claimed here in terms of the Florida Ethics Code or the state. This is a lawsuit alleging violation of civil rights and a violation of the city charter, so it doesn't come under that which was dealt with sort of ethical violations.
Matt, would it be covered under our liability coverage that we have?
First step is, and I discussed this with Councilman Bell in the break, first step is we'll check to see whether we have some insurance that covers this, which makes this discussion then moot. But I fear that we don't have insurance, that we're self-insured for a lot of things, so I don't know, and I haven't spoken with Kurt or Marcy about whether we have any insurance covering this. So that's a possibility, which would be great, because then the city would not be out of pocket for any defense. But absent that, we need to make a decision regarding this. So.
Thank you. Yes, what a surprise. When we were at the dinner the other night honoring Chief Roll, my daughter called me and said that she had just been served on my behalf. And basically, the Redland Company, Mr. Munns and the Redland Company, is holding me personally responsible for the termination of the contract and for the cease and desist order and everything else. So it's just simply, I'm going to have to defend it no matter what, and it's the city needs to defend me up front, not defend me later. So that's what I'm just asking for, that it would be an upfront defense. So just as if anybody else has a right to be defended in case they're, come at them with a frivolous, baseless lawsuit, they need to be protected as well.
I didn't want to get into, if you want to get into the substance of the options that you have, I will. I didn't, the first question was, do you want to discuss this at this point, or you want to discuss it, next week at a special call meeting?
Mayor, may I ask a question? First of all, I've not seen copies of the case. Is it of our purview to be able to see the? So
it's filed in the court record, so it's not a.
I mean, out of fairness to myself and the rest of the council, I think it would be more fair for me to be able to see what is actually in the document before we have to sit up here and start, reacting. And maybe by that time you'd also have a chance to see if there's any sort of insurances that might Obviously, if time is the issue, I would make myself available for a special call. It wouldn't be a really long, drawn-out special call. But it
I'm
seems
happy
kind
to
of...
distribute, if that's what you wanted. That's why I asked you whether you wanted to discuss this now or later. We're happy to distribute this and set up a special call for, some point next week.
Well, I'm only one person, but I'd just like to see a little bit more before we had to go into a whole bunch of detail.
I'm commenting on that.
It's just...
I have no problem with anybody seeing it. In fact, I want everybody to see it, quite frankly. But I don't think that has any bearing on whether or not I'm defended up front or in the back end. I think everybody on this council, if anybody is attacked in this way by any type of a lawsuit, we should all defend. We should be defended quickly and expediently without any hesitation, no matter what the lawsuit says. So I absolutely think that everybody should have a right to have this. And I just want to obtain an attorney right away, and I want to be as aggressive on this as I possibly can. And I don't think it matters, Mr. Porter, the content of this lawsuit. I think that I deserve to be defended immediately and quickly. Thank you.
Still, Mayor, I just said was my position that I would like to see what the lawsuit says. That's all. And I'm certainly not in Ms. Bell's position, or I'm not in Ms. Bell's shoes at this particular point. I'm just sitting on my behalf. I'd just like to be able to see what it's about. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. It's not really relevant to whether or not we defend or defend now or pay after the fact. In your experience, I mean, what are we talking about here probably as a beginning point, $15,000 or $20,000?
I really don't know because I just read the lawsuit quickly, and it just depends. If it's a motion to dismiss, then I think it's a fairly small amount. But if it turns into a more substantial lawsuit, then you could be really talking substantial money.
Tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah. 5.
Passing this. I'm prepared.
Ready-made copies.
So at this point, I really just need direction as to whether you want to discuss this substantively now, or whether you'd like to follow Mr. Porter's suggestion and discuss it as a special call next week.
I think as an elected official that, Ms. Bell should be protected, and whatever we need to do to move forward with that, let's do it. And, I think we need to proceed in identifying an attorney to represent her. And then when it comes to the cost and a budget and all that, we could talk about that later. And I can call a special call meeting to further go into the specifics, but I think now we should certainly look at representing her in some form or fashion. So.
Up front.
Up front, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, what we'll do is we'll help her to identify, a lawyer that would be appropriate. Hopefully, that because you're doing this up front as opposed to on the back end, as long as we're discussing what the statute provides, is that the city has the option of doing it up front, which is pretty typical, or on the back end if the party prevails. But I think if we negotiate it up front, we could get a better rate from the lawyer as opposed to...
Any other comments? Any other comments?
Why don't we'll do it in two parts. We're going to move ahead and we will start to identify somebody. We'll have a special call next week to approve the attorney and to move ahead, if that's all right with you.
As long as we can get going.
As long as we can get going.
And then the council have time to read this?
That way the council will have time to read this, but in the meantime, we're not wasting time.
You need a motion tonight that we're at least committing to defend up front with approval of dollars and attorneys to follow shortly?
That's up to what the council feels comfortable with at this time.
I would make that motion and see what happens.
Can properly move in second?
Second.
Properly move in second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Any business for the committee? Is that it?
No, I need to request an executive session on the Redlands, the other Redlands lawsuit.
Redland 1.
You got it?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any business, Ms. Bell?
I think I've been
you
given the business.
Yeah, big bombshell. Mr. Hodge, any business for the committee of the whole?
No, sir.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
I just again extend my invitation to each and every one of you to attend our Charter Review Committee meetings. It's not at such an onerous hour. This week's meeting will be held on Friday morning at 10 a.m. following an event in the Southwest area, a sign unveiling and some improvements there. Meet for probably an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I would think that probably the next couple of meetings would be of great interest to each and every one of you, so that if your schedules permit, we'd certainly welcome your attendance and participation.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Ms. Garner?
No business, Mayor, thank you.
Mr. Porter?
No business, Mayor, thank you.
Mr. Manager?
No business.
Thank you all so very much.